Welcome to the podcast.
Impeccable timing.
No, it doesn't go like that. You do it then, Al.
Hello, everyone. This is the Cacophony Sessions. I'm Alex, your host for this evening, because Whittle couldn't be bothered to do it.
I think I'll do it properly, shall I? Shall I take it from the top? Hey there, Funketeers, and a warm welcome to episode 6 of the Cacophony Sessions podcast. More specifically, the shambles that is the Halloween Spooky Fun Spectacular episode. But seeing as though this is probably going to come out in sort of mid-November, it doesn't really feel right to dress up as such, I don't think. We should get our act together, guys, I think. Definitely. I'm Dan. Instead, tonight we're doing a deep dive into one of the behemoths of pop music. We are going there. We are going Michael Jackson's Thriller. We'll be running it down track by track. I'm sure some of the guys will talk some absolute bollocks as well. So speaking of which, let's meet my guests tonight. Alex.
Nice to see you.
Tom.
I do not wish to help Jeremy Clarkson be amusing in the event of my death.
Martyn.
Hello, I'm Martyn. It don't matter if you're black or white, unless you're playing chess.
And Dave.
When I inevitably choke to death on gummy bears, I hope everybody here will just refer to me as I died by bears.
And with that, I think it's going to set us up pretty well for the shambles that is going to be tonight's podcast. Let's find out a little bit about what everyone's been up to in the few weeks that we've been away from your ears.
Well, what have I been doing? Nothing except work. But I have listened to new music. Well, I say new-ish. I bought, because I had a really hard time not Pirate Baying it. I bought Hell for Heroes Neon Handshake. Does anyone remember that band?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good, but I never owned it, and I managed to get it for like 30p on Amazon, so I was pretty happy with that. So I've listened to that. It's it's still a really, really good album. I've also been listening to it's kind of like a bedroom project by a friend at work's friend. It's called Skeletech. That's what his project's called. And it's essentially a mix between Sepultura and the film Terminator 2.
Winner.
It's called Cyborg Flesh. It's really good. If you like Sepultura and you like random electronic samples from 80s films, get into it. It's really good. I'd highly recommend anyone giving it a go. And yeah, Hell Heroes is great. I've also been listening, because I kind of went down a British rock sort of nostalgia fest. So I've been listening to a lot of 100 Reasons as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and despite them being on a major record label and kind of being on the TV, they were still underrated. That's how good they were.
They really were. I've got an old split CD with 100 Reasons and Garrison from like two bands from really early on. The reason I bring that up is two of their best tracks are on that split, so it's worth checking out.
I saw them in Exeter, and I remember Biffy Clyro was supporting them at the time, and I decided then that's when I thought Billy Clyro a bit overrated, Tom.
Pum, 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 shots fired.
Shots fired.
Early stuff is really good.
The early Biffy stuff is great, but they have gone downhill. Actually, their new album is a bit of a return to form, but from 2007 onwards, it was all just downhill.
Yeah, we've discussed them in the old Stadium Rock conversation.
Dave, what have you been up to?
Well, I caught coronavirus, which was excellent.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, about 2 weeks ago exactly to the day, a cleaner that works here at work brought it in, and the wife got it and then passed it on to me. So we've been in isolation for 10 days, ended last week. So I'm back to work as of this week, and I'm taking some extra hours working at the Amazon sorting office, which is, horrendously early hours, but actually quite good fun.
Did you get any symptoms?
Bit knackered, shortness of breath, and then can't really smell, can't really taste, but came on literally 2 weeks ago.
I had no taste. I listened to nothing but Soundgarden.
Come on.
Shots fired.
Pew, 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 pew.
You can tell we haven't done this for a while because we're all just digging.
So, has the coronavirus impacted your ability to discern great pop bangers?
It hasn't. Main thing that it did was stop me from tasting wine and beer, so I just went to the supermarket and bought the cheapest of both because I still wanted the effect.
I was half expecting you to say just vodka and just tap water.
I think I could have drunk that quite happily. There's literally nothing. I was eating like truffled lasagna with loads of pepper and salt on it, just nothingness. It was like eating a cloud.
I'm glad you're all right.
Well, yeah.
It's odd. Yeah, I'm cool, man. It wasn't that bad.
Surviving coronavirus.
Dodging death.
It's happening. Keep up the fight. We got this.
Just to do the necessary public health announcement bit here, just because Dave didn't get severe symptoms doesn't mean that other people won't. So please don't add this to the rubbish I see on my Facebook feed about how it's just a cold.
Oh no, I was going around kissing anyone I could meet. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to be doing that.
I bet you were, Dave. But I did have to throw that in, didn't I? You know, there has to be the little disclaimer.
Tonguing old ladies in the street, coughing on old men.
That's why the wife gave you
Yeah,
coronavirus.
she was trying to off me, and rightly so.
Martyn, what have you been up to?
Work, my counselling course, volunteering, very busy. I'm working on music for the band. But musically, I was thinking about a chat about Soundgarden, and you cannot deny a song like Come As You Are. I mean, Lane Staley's vocals on that are incredible. Just unbelievable.
Do you want to tell people that you're referencing a meme there?
It's my favourite meme. It's so good. Rest in peace, brother. We'll never forget. But musically, I've been kind of just catching stuff here and there where I can. Six Music I've been listening to in the mornings while I'm getting ready for work and stuff. And I'm into that whole scrappy indie punk rock stuff that's really huge at the moment. Your Idols, Savages, all that stuff. And there's the band Fontaine's DC I really like a lot at the moment. They are absolutely fantastic. Just pure energy and attitude. My favourite of that group of bands is Shame. Their first album was incredible. I played it over and over again. They got new stuff coming out, which I'm excited about. But also an older band called Proto Martyr. Tom, you may like them. They're a post-punk band, basically. They're from like Detroit, and they're very political. But they sound kind of like more of a political angry Interpol. Really amazing guitar tones, just kind of angular riffs, kind of off-time stuff. Kind of taking that post-punk, making it modern, making it political. Well, post-punk's always really been political anyway. But I would highly suggest giving them a listen. I'm listening to them a lot at the moment. But the new Shame album coming out and Fontaine's DC, they're kind of my three bands at the moment.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
Yeah, I've been really into that band as well, just to quickly follow you up. And I've also put on the recommendation in the chat about that Working Men's Club band. But I think there's a real sort of electronic post-punk revival sort of going on there. And yeah, Shame are great and Fontaine's DC are great.
If we're talking about punk, can I quickly say, if anyone hasn't listened to me yet, listen to the Australian punk band. They're called The Chats. If you haven't heard it, they've got a song on YouTube called Smoko, and once you watch it, you'll probably decide they're the best punk band that's ever existed. They're so Australian, and it's just the best, honestly.
Bogans, as they call them. The redneck name in Australia.
Yeah, just anyone out there, just listen to them. The Chats, they're so good.
I'll put it on my later bass.
Later base. Oh dear. And that brings us to the part of tonight's episode where we find out what the Smashing Pumpkins are up to, Tom.
Finally, someone's taken the bait after all this fishing.
Hey, to be fair, I actually haven't. They released 2 new songs since we last did an episode. And it's to be fair, that they did release 2 new singles. I haven't listened to them that much. It's a double A side. The first one sounded much like all the other stuff they released. The second, the second half is really good. It's got guitars in it again, thank God. But actually, that isn't what I've been spending most of my time listening to. So the last month has been really, really good for music in general. So Van Art released a new album. I have now listened to it, Martyn. I can confirm it's back to having choruses again. So I was really enjoying that album. Van Art was the singer in Oceanside, and this is his third solo album. That's really good. Youth Movie Soundtrack Strategies have confirmed they are reforming to play at a festival next year and have new music on the way, so I've been revisiting that. The singer from Grammatics released 2 new singles and 2 new tracks under a band name. Is it Too Much Future? That was great. That was like quite polished indie rock, but really, really good. And then I'm not working full time at the moment because of capacity at work, and so I'm spending a lot of time digging back through old records, and I had a really good binge on Arcane Roots. They're quite a good sort of anthemic heavy band that are worth checking out. Listening to loads of Maybe She Will again, because they're always great, and apparently they've got new music coming out in the very near future. So yeah, it's been a really good month for music, and lots of bands to check out that I haven't checked. I checked out a little bit of Fontaine's DC. It's not music for me, but it's really, really good at what it does.
Tom, you're going to have to send me a list of all these recommendations. So you keep mentioning names, I keep forgetting to look them up.
And you are the only person on this podcast who'd even like them, Martyn.
Just send me the list so I can put it on my later base, and I'll check them out.
Although to be fair, Dan, I do strongly suggest that you listen to. There's a couple of tracks by Arcane Roots. One's called Slow, and the other is called Belief. Slow and Belief are the 2 tracks that I think you should probably listen to, Dan, because they've got a very catchy chorus and it's very well sung. And I completely forgot that I've also been listening to Agent Fresco again. And Matt, who is a friend of the show on the podcast, sent over a load of links to bands like Leprous, and I had a good binge on that sort of thing as well. So, yeah, loads of music this month.
Awesome. I've been editing our bonus episode, so thank you again to Aldo. So go and check that one out if you haven't already. It's a concise, briefer endeavour from us, as a few of us delve into our favourite soul albums of all time, so go back and listen to that one. Al or Tom, did you get the chance to listen to that?
I did listen to it. There was a staggering lack of Smashing Pumpkins on it. I felt a little bit out of the loop on Pumpkins news. So I don't know what to think about it. It was very informative, actually, because I actually listened to it whilst I was at work. And every time you guys mentioned, because soul's not my thing, really, I don't know anything about it. So every time you guys mentioned something, I was on YouTube, like, checking out the songs. And yeah, a lot of it is really good. I didn't like what's he called? Something Green.
Al Green.
Al Green.
Yeah, I wasn't that into Al Green, to be honest. There was something off about it.
He's got a lot of slow songs.
Yeah, but other than that, yeah, I like a lot of recommendations, and Aldo seems to know what he's talking about, and yeah, didn't have, the 3 idiots on ruining it.
What I found quite interesting is because it's been a while since we've had one of these podcasts, the Craig Charles Funk and Shoal Show every week does a countdown to the album. He's been on his last, 4 albums now, so the last first, second and fourth, or whatever, his best ever picks, and all 4 of them are ones that we talked about in that episode.
Tom, did you have any thoughts?
It's really interesting hearing you guys talk about soul, because Aldo particularly knows what he's talking about. It's just, and I like some of it, but there's no, particularly at the moment with the global pandemic, there's no time where I would put soul on over something else. So I like it, I appreciate it, but when I'm doing stuff around the house, I can't think of it, or out and about or in the car, I can't think of a single time where soul would be my genre of choice, even though, well, no, it's like, I like listening to interesting, weird electro stuff when I'm doing household chores. I like to listen to heavy stuff when I'm driving. If I'm sat round just chilling out, I tend to listen to instrumental stuff. So although I really I grew up listening to, I had one of the first CDs I had was Songs in the Key of Life. I grew up, soul was always there, but it was never, I never found a place for it. You know, like, so yeah, really interesting podcast to listen to. Go back and listen to it. And I don't mean to sound negative, because it is a good podcast. It's just I like soul, and I'm a fan of the albums they talk about, but there's just no time in my life where they would be the thing I would choose to listen to.
Glowing review from Tom there, thanks. Speaking of things that didn't exactly go according to plan, we were going to talk about our favourite Halloween-themed songs, but we couldn't get off our asses. Do people want to talk about our thought processes around that for 5 minutes or so?
Yeah, sure. So normally I will DJ a Halloween evening, because in Plymouth, where we live, is a big student town. And actually, when you're doing the DJ circuit here, the busiest night of the year is Halloween, because at Christmas time and New Year's, which would be busiest time in other places, we don't have the students anymore. So there's quite a few big gigs kicking around that time. And I don't always want to be playing like rock songs or the Monster Mash. So I try to deep dive a little bit more and have a little bit more of a eclectic Halloween mix for people that don't like those sort of things. So things I've sort of picked up on the past are like Corey Hart's Sunglasses at Night, or Outkast featuring Khalees, Dracula's Wedding, or Kanye West Monster, or like David Bowie Scary Monsters, or The Cure Lullaby, like anything which is like Halloween or spooky-ish based, but not necessarily a Halloween song per se.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many bloody songs you listen to non-stop. Like, I mean, I guess everyone kind of likes the Monster Mash, but on Halloween you can't repeat it 10 times in a night, can you? You've got to fit with other stuff.
And there's loads of really good, like, obviously, like, the Horrors and Misfits and those type of bands are, like, any kind of sort of horror-based...
Cramps, Birthday Party.
Psychobilly, yeah, that kind of stuff. So
I had a struggle with thinking about it, because I was going to choose the obvious ones like Birthday Party, Cramps, Early Horrors, that sort of thing. And then I thought about like going a bit left field and thinking, well, anything off a Nine Inch Nails album or anything like that. And then I thought, well, go even a bit more left field. It's not a horror song, but it's a song that puts total dread and horror in me every time I'd attempt to listen to it. Is Frankie Teardrop by Suicide. I mean, that's a horror film in a song, basically. But what I'm actually was going to go for was There's a Ghost in My House by Ardeen Taylor. It's not about a ghost in his house, but I love the song, and I just love the whole idea about, a ghost in his house.
Yeah, I know that song.
I love it. It's such a cool song. It's a Northern Soul classic, man. It's just a beaut.
A few songs that I thought of... someone who was derided on an earlier episode was Will Smith, but that song he did as Fresh Prince with Jazzy Jeff, A Nightmare on My Street.
Yeah, I do actually play that.
That's actually quite a cool song, and I think it was supposed to be the theme song to a Nightmare on Elm Street, but there was some legal stuff involved and it didn't end up happening or didn't become as big. But yeah, that's an interesting song. And then you think of like songs that are just plain scary. A lot of David Lynch's work on the Twin Peaks soundtrack. Threnody to the Victims of Hiroshima. So that's a Penderecki tune. Tom, I thought you might appreciate the classical reference there.
Yeah, that's good.
He has no idea what you're talking about. We found him out.
He's never heard of it, yeah.
He's a fraud. He's never listened.
He can't load up the wiki page quick enough.
quick, I can hear the clicking.
It's something I've listened to in passing, but it didn't jump to mind.
You can't listen to that in passing. It's like
Tom can listen to it in passing.
Horrifically dreadful music.
Yeah. But then, like, there's a lot when you start. There's a lot of like horrifically dreadful music, particularly like the stuff that was written as like for 9/11 and stuff like that. There's some pretty horrific stuff in there as well.
Well, I mean, like those country ones, like "We Will Stay United."
The redneck
That's
anthem.
dreadful. That's dreadful rather than horrific, if that makes sense, Alex.
Yeah.
Also, it's about that time where I drop a random genre no one's heard of. Has anyone heard of the Japanese noisecore genre?
Yes.
I have,
yeah.
All right. So there's loads of like Halloween-based songs which are there because they just sound like a horror film that's being eaten by a VHS machine.
as music fans, we all have to agree the scariest song of all time ever written is 4 Minutes of Silence. There is nothing worse to a music fan than silence.
Ooh, ominous.
Whoa.
Hang on, you mean 342, don't you? Whatever it is, John Cage.
Oh, come off it, James May. Fuck's sake, man. You knew what I meant.
It's 433. That's it. I had to check it.
Here we go. He's fact checked.
Of course I did.
That fact has been checked.
The thing is, though, 433 isn't a silent piece of music. It's a piece of performance art. It's really, really clever. It's like, what's the guy who does this? It's from the same school of minimalism as the guy who does I Am in a Room. And it's performance art. It's not, so it's really clever, and it's the idea that the music of the piece is a collaborative process amongst the noise in the audience and things that an abstract sound plays a role in music, and I think that's quite important. So I don't think 433 is scary. I think 433 is culturally very important, bridging a gap between classical music and performance art that otherwise hadn't necessarily been bridged in the same way. I think that performance art and classical music had, before the 50s and 60s particularly, had sort of been two separate areas, and I think that they got bridged very neatly with what the minimalists were doing, and I think it's really cool.
Well, that's me told.
Yeah, but the best Halloween song of all time is Ghostbusters.
Well, yeah, it is.
That was on my shortlist.
It just is.
Yeah, it was on my shortlist. It was. I spent, the thing with Halloween song is you go. I was trying to think of songs that lyrically contain something about Halloween, because there's loads of songs I would play at Halloween. I mean, a great
Tubular Bells.
Yeah, it's theme for The Exorcist. Yeah, but I decided I wanted to go for something that wasn't instrumental and had lyrics, and ended up dredging the barrel. And it is actually a good song, if not one of her best, and ended up going with Kate Bush, Waking the Witch, because it was about the Salem witch trials, and I figured that was Halloween themed lyrically, so I could have that.
Oh, you told me about it, so I listened to it, making sure but I was watching it and just going, I was watching on YouTube, it's like, this has got nothing to do with Halloween. Like, but other than the lyrics, it's not really... I don't think it was I personally don't think it's in the spirit of it, Tom. I think you took this to the limits.
Well, that's what I kind of like about it, because, I mean, for me, the idea of DJing rock solely or like cheesy Halloween songs at all night is my idea of hell. So having to think outside the box is actually quite interesting to me.
What about Season of the Witch by Donovan?
Yeah.
Yes, absolute fucking banger. It's in my list.
Hazard by Richard Marx as well.
Warren Zevon, Werewolf in London.
Oh, that's a tune. Yeah, Warren Zevon was awesome, actually. I discovered he was in a group with the remnants of R.E.M. Called the Hindu Love Gods, and they did a cover of Raspberry Beret.
Yeah.
Drink.
So you can go ahead and take that drink.
I've got a few to the list, but there's no point mentioning because we're rushing along. But the best Halloween song of all time is the Ramones' Pet Sematary.
Oh, good choice.
Oh, yeah. So good. Like I sing it all the time when it's in my head, like, because I don't want to be buried in a pet cemetery. How's that not addictive?
That's almost as catchy as MC Fry's appearance in the end of the last episode.
I mean, okay, I'll be 100% honest. I was on the fence about mentioning this because it's really ultra self-serving. So I'm not going to count it. But it is on Spotify, so it is technically a song out there. My favourite Halloween song of all time is by a band that me and Tom were in, called The Wife Beaters, because we wore vests, not because we beat women. We didn't pick the name, and we didn't get a lot of gigs because of it. But we had a song called "I'm a Mummy," and I'm not joking. It's on Spotify if you're listening to it. We had a Halloween EP, and maybe it's because I've played it a billion times. But unfortunately, it is 100% my favourite Halloween song of all time. So it's really self-serving, I know, but unfortunately, it is 100% my favourite Halloween song.
I also like the irony that the band name is Wife Beaters and the best song is I'm a Mummy.
Yeah, it was so Vic the singer had most of the creative control with the name. I was never that keen on it, I must be honest, or very keen at all. And we didn't get any gigs because of the name. But some of his lyrics are, in terms of that sort of scrappy Ramones style punk, his lyrics are pretty clever generally.
The main bulk of tonight's topic of conversation will be concerning a track-by-track rundown of the 1982 album Thriller by Michael Jackson, which came 3 years after the success of Off the Wall, his first solo album, and it had high expectations. He teamed up with Quincy Jones once again and made what is now the biggest selling album of all time. So you've all heard of it. There's 9 tracks on it. We'll probably cover our opinions on maybe what proves to be a controversial topic at times. So we'll give a disclaimer here that we may cover some things that are not necessarily easy to talk about. So if you have an issue with that, you might want to give this one a miss, guys. But I think we're going to try and tackle it as a piece of music, as opposed to anything that may jeopardize one's perspective on that music. So we'll try and keep it tasteful, see how it goes. Track number 1 on the album was a single. It's called Wanna Be Starting Something. And I want to hear someone else's voice right now.
Why is it so long?
What, this song?
Yeah, why is it so long?
Because it's a dance banger, man. It is a cool song.
Yeah, it would have been made for disco halls. That's why, probably.
I get that, but like as a listening experience, for an album at home, that song did not need to be 6 minutes long. Like they should have had that as a dance floor edit, and then because he sings like the same chorus over and over again, so it's stuck in my head, but I hate myself for it because it's not even the best chorus on the album. And yeah, I do not understand. There is no need for that song on the album to be over 6 minutes long. There's not enough material within the song to justify it. So it's a catchy chorus that totally outstays its welcome.
Oh, well, I'm going to say completely different. I think as a at-home listening experience, I am all over like mega long songs with a really decent groove, amazing production. Because the thing is with that track is it's Quincy Jones, man. He is banging in this track. It's just his production values over it are incredible.
But there's no development in it.
It doesn't need it. It doesn't need it because the sounds themselves are so good that they hook you in, they grab you, and I could just listen to them all day. The synth sounds, that bass is just unreal, man. It just drives forward.
Oh, the bass playing on the whole album's great, but the synth sounds have dated terribly.
I disagree totally.
Yeah, I disagree. With Vaporwave and the rise of things like that, making that cool again, those synths are icy cool on that song.
I think I think in years to come they'll be seen as timeless. That whole 80s production stuff.
It's similar to the Whispers and The Beat Goes On. That kind of Miami Vaporwave sound that's coming back into fashion.
Dave's territory.
Yeah, definitely Dave's territory.
No, I love that song to bits.
Well, yeah, it's very sort of dusty disco stuff.
I think it's my favourite track on the album. It's just got such a hard groove, and it
certainly kicks the door in.
It kicks the door in, and it is just upbeat, and it makes you feel good. And if you feel good, then I'll take it on board.
I'll admit I wasn't overly fond of it. I mean, I've actually never listened to Thriller at all, so I listened to it like 4 times in a row just to get to grips with it. And I loved the upbeat feel to it, like the actual groove and everything. I really liked, but I really think they overdid it with the backing vocals on it. Like, it kind of...
Oh, the African chant stuff.
Yeah, it just kind of... I just don't know, I just thought it was a bit too much for me, to be honest.
See, I kind of like that as well. I love the African chant stuff. I just think it adds a flavour to it. That they were
I get it.
They probably finished the track and were like, this is great, but it just needs something. And I think what they found was perfect for the track.
I don't know, I think it kind of ruined the chorus for me, in all honesty. I think it was just a bit too much. Like Tom said, I thought it was a bit long as well. I mean, the guitar runs on it were really cool. I like that. I didn't like the highs in the vocals too much. Some of the high bits that they were singing, I wasn't overly a big fan of, which is stupid for a Michael Jackson song, I guess, but there was something that just didn't resonate with me with this song. But I also figured out like where, because I actually noticed that the beat in that was actually from, well, not from, but the Bloodhound Gang used it for one of their songs. I was like, I knew I recognised this song from somewhere.
Yeah, no, that opening track is, in my opinion, a really good opener. It's it's given a nod to the disco scene. It is repetitive, but it's kind of the nature of it. It's due as a song that you would play to be rhythmically enjoyed whilst dancing. So the African section at the back, the Kena Sanamakasa, whatever the actual phrasing is like been sampled multiple times by hip hop and other genres. At the time, a lot of African artists were starting to get sampled, like Fela and William Adaboya and loads of other people like that. And I just think it's a solid opener. It is repetitive, but that is the nature of dance music. It's something to be enjoyed whilst rhythmically moving. So
exactly.
The lyrics don't need to be that deep because no one's really listening to them.
I absolutely love repetition in music. I get drawn to it. I mean, anything that repeats, if it's good, a good hook, I want to hear it again, and I want to hear it over and over again. So it's why it works for me.
Well, I'm surprised no one's picked up on the lyrics, "You're a vegetable."
It doesn't really make any sense, and it's very paranoid. And I think it set us up for a lot of what was yet to come in Michael Jackson's catalogue, in that it is this little paranoid world he lives in that doesn't really make any sense to anybody outside of it, and it's leaking through. But how else do you open the biggest selling album of all time other than with an epic 6-minute disco funk track? How else should you do it?
Also, it's co-written by Quincy Jones, whose world is fairly paranoid for a different reason.
Doesn't outstay its welcome because it's such a warm hook. It's just a fun opener, and you don't want that fun to stop. I mean, I don't think it is over long. It's the perfect length to open an album. I think as a track it is, it's great. It's a sequel to what he did on his previous album with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough,
which is another great song.
Yeah, he opens that album with that, and he kind of updates it by adding Miami synths to it and updates it for the next album.
Also, we've talked about this before, but the massive rise of disco, like stratospheric, and then the equally massive fall that it had. And it's exactly why when the next album comes out, he has to change tack entirely. And we've talked about this before with artists like Nile Rodgers or whatever, where they just have to keep skipping because they don't want to get caught as a disco artist in inverted commas because it's so uncool at the time.
The next track is an interesting one because it wasn't released as a single, so it's one of the more obscure ones from the record. It's called Baby Be Mine, and it's up-tempo, funky synth number. It's not on the same level of energy as the previous track, but I think it's good. I think it establishes a cool vibe for the album. It's a lot of fun. What does everyone else think?
One of the 3 Rod Temperton writers on this as well.
I mean, I personally preferred it to the opening track, to be honest.
Yeah.
I thought the drum intro was cool. I like it. I mean, that's one thing Michael Jackson always has on his albums. It's like one of the best drum sounds I've ever heard. Like, how the hell do they make that snare sound so tight and just amazing? I really like the synths on it. I think I liked it so much because it really reminds me of the Sonic 2 Casino song.
Yes.
Like, if you listen to it again, like thinking that in mind, I guarantee you it will click something in your brain where you're like, yes, that's it. I thought the verses and the choruses blend perfectly. I just thought it was pretty good start to finish, and I do like the sort of muddy bass sound on it as well. Yeah, overall, I really liked it. Really, really good song.
I don't have much to add. I mean, I prefer it to the opener. It's not my favourite track on the album. I think the thing I like about this album, about Thriller, like I'm just going to point out, I'm going to be saying a lot of negative things about this album, but that's only because I know that I don't dislike the album. I have listened to it several times. I don't dislike it. I also realise that there are at least 3 people in this chat who do really like it. So I'm going to counterpoint a bit.
Yeah.
So
you could counterpoint.
I don't have anything particularly bad to say about this song. This album's odd in that it was described when it came out as being like a few singles with a couple of bits of filler. But one of the tracks that was released as a single which we'll get to later, I would say this is better than. Actually, no, it's better than 2 of the tracks that were released as singles, sorry. And actually, I'd prefer it to Wanna Be Starting Something, so you could say it's better than 3 of them, but hey.
I really like this track. It's one of my favourite tracks on the album, actually. I like it more than most of the singles, actually. I go back to this track a lot. I think the synths are very Princey, so it's always going to appeal to me. But it is a well-constructed pop song. And it's just, there's not a lot you can dislike about this. It's very warm sounding. His voice is absolute fire on this track. Those high notes that he gets in the chorus and the pre-chorus, it's just insane how he carries it with such control in his voice. Is just fantastic. He really was something else at this point in his career in terms of being a pop artist. You can't argue that there's many singers that could nail pop music better than anybody at this point in time. And I think Baby Be Mine is a really good example of why that is. It's a nothing song, and it's not the greatest melody, but he makes it so good purely through his technique and his ability.
I agree with you totally.
I mean, he's got one of the most distinctive voices ever.
Yeah. I think for me, it's kind of, it taps right. I mean, I've probably mentioned it quite a lot of time. For me, music is, a lot of it is tied into nostalgia for me, especially older music. And I would have heard this going about before I really gave a shit who Michael Jackson was when I was younger, when it came out. But it is, like Dan said, I think you can define this song as warmth. It is just, the production again is perfect. And it just reminds you of just a sunny day, a sunny summer's day, man, and you just got not a care in the world, and and like Dan said, it's a bit of a nothing song, but it's more about the feel of the song than about the song itself for me, than about the structure. I mean, to be honest, I could just listen to the verse on repeat personally. It is just so warm, it's so nice, the bass line is something else. It's just got a really warm, sunny, happy-go-lucky kind of like feel to it, and I think it's a good follower from the opener. It's a nice change in tempo. It just brings things down a little bit, but not too much on the album, so it's not like a jolting change in the running order. I think it fits. I mean, for me, obviously the first track is the highlight of the album for me, but I think, you know, when you look at the sequencing, I think it fits perfectly in on the album. And yeah, it's just a lovely song. That's all I can say about it, really.
I think you've nailed it right on the head.
I think this album suffers from the same problem that Songs in the Key of Life have. It's like all the tracks are such a high quality. Something like this that should have, whether it was on another album by another artist, probably would have been a top 10 hit, is just completely overshadowed by the fact it's surrounded by like 10 other tracks which are incredible.
There is at least one, probably 2 tracks on this album that I actively dislike. And there's nothing on Songs in the Key of Life that I actively dislike. So I'd say, although this album hasn't sold as well, I'd say Songs in the Key of Life is definitely a better album.
Ooh.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that. I'm just saying it suffers from the same sort of problem, which is it's quite rare for an album to have, 9 songs which all could in their own rights be, whether it's your opinion or not, marketable to a large audience.
The only thing that this album suffers from is the speed at which it was made and released compared to some other albums by other artists. You can tell, only being 9 tracks and like most of them being the singles being released, you can tell it does feel a little bit at times sort of cobbled together, which brings us on to the next track.
Oh God, here we go.
Yeah, certainly not a cohesive story.
Speaking of suffering, which is the only word I would use to describe track number 3, which is...
It's just appalling.
The Girl Is Mine, which is a song that I will get onto in a second because I need to compose myself for a moment because, yeah, guys... Paul McCartney shows up.
Oh, and in what a way.
Paul McCartney post-Beatles had a couple of good moments with Wings and hasn't made a single other good piece of music.
Yeah, this is also the point where Michael Jackson ends up befriending him, and because Paul and his wife have moved most of the subsidiary and publishing rights over to Apple Records, Michael ends up buying the Beatles' back catalogue.
Has anyone ever seen that footage of Paul McCartney just about to play live, trying to phone up Michael Jackson's lawyers to ask if he can play his own songs?
I haven't seen that.
It is fantastic.
As much as anything with this song, it's not really believable. Like, neither of the two people singing it are believable singing the lines that they're singing. Neither of them have the voice for the lines that they're singing, and I don't really like the lyrics anyway.
No, and there are also there's a bit of talking sort of lyrics at the end, which are real cheesy.
It's a dreadful track. It proves, I think, that Michael Jackson is probably he's two of the songs that he wrote. The other two songs that he wrote on this album are both great. But it's like, you look at the great singer-songwriters would write a whole album themselves. He contributes 3 tracks to this album. 2 of them are great and 1 of them's awful. It sort of shows me that at this particular moment in time, he wasn't capable of writing an album of material himself. I just hate this song.
I want to bring up a slight secondary point. This isn't the only song he's done with Paul McCartney.
Say.
Say.
That is a good song.
Is a cracker.
Yeah.
When I listened to this, because I've never listened to the album, and I didn't actually know, I had no idea this was Paul McCartney when I listened to it, until I talked to Tom a week or 2 later. It's the odd one with Paul McCartney. I was honestly the whole time going, this guy's terrible. He can't sing for shit. Honestly, the whole time I was like, this guy's awful. Like, the best way to describe this song is just douche chills. You know when someone does things so douchey, it just makes you like chill, like uncomfortable. Just like, like there were moments where I couldn't listen to it. Like that conversation at the end, like, hey, how you doing? It's like, hello, Michael. Like, oh my God, like those were grown men with like bank accounts and mortgages, and
I don't think they had mortgages.
How did they make that? How the hell did they make that?
I don't really understand the relationship, because Michael, we won't get too much into his personal life because we're trying to avoid that, but he was quite an immature person, and Paul isn't really like that, so I couldn't really see their friendship going pretty much further than professional or kind of just respective. So I don't know how this relationship... I know they ended up hating each other because of the back catalogue deal.
It was a Werther's original moment. That's what that was. The weird uncle and the immature little boy.
I'm looking at my notes, and because I had to look up what the instrument is called, is like the mark tree, also known as the nail tree or bar chimes. I think that might be the lamest use of an instrument in any music ever. Like, it reminded me like of a Disney song or something, but like where like Martians had landed and decided this is what a Disney song is, and then tried to replicate it, and trying to replicate how humans emote with each, like, talk and communicate with each other. Like, I've never been so uncomfortable. Like, even thinking about it now, I'm just chilling out. It's terrible.
Also, does anyone have an opinion on Ebony and Ivory of Paul McCartney and Stevie?
See, this is the problem. Paul McCartney shows up in the careers of Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder, and at that point is the exact point where things started to go downhill for both careers. Paul McCartney has a lot to answer for. Now, I like a lot of Paul McCartney compositions as part of the Beatles. In Tom's right, he did do some good stuff with Wings. But from this point, it's just shitting on the careers of Stevie Wonder, shitting on the careers of Michael Jackson, and then fucking showing up with like the occasional frog chorus or
Mull of Kintyre or something.
Oh, yeah.
Or Wonderful Christmas Time. No, it's not a Wonderful Christmas Time, Paul, until you can please go away.
It always annoys me if somebody brings up the writing of Lennon and McCartney and starts to defend McCartney. I'm like, no. There's so many clangers you can bring up while he's on his own and out of the creative control of Lennon.
He's written like 2,000 songs. Of course he's going to have 100 good ones that everyone likes. The rest are fucking shit.
Just so happens that nearly all the good ones he's written that everyone likes were co-written with a guy who died before Thriller came out. Yeah. And And the problem I find with Wings, and if you go back and listen to a Wings record, just I've noticed it's almost like every song is written. He has a chorus riff and a verse riff, and no idea how they go together. Listen to like Band on the Run, Live and Let Die, the singles. They're two great riffs. Like the chorus is great and the verse is great, but they don't go together. It's almost like they just glue them together. A bit like what the Beatles did with The Day in the Life, but it didn't have Lennon's charisma to pull it together.
Yeah, Live and Let Die is really bad. It kind of goes reggae halfway through a kind of big horn section. You're like, what the hell?
It's actually a great song until that.
I do like the Beatles, but Paul McCartney showing up here does absolutely nothing for the album. And in terms of what it does in sequence, you've got two upbeat songs, and then suddenly you've got... Oxford Dictionary definition of trite is lacking originality or freshness, dull on account of overuse. So I dare suggest that this song is trite, and it
was so uncomfortable, man.
It just does nothing for an album that's coming out in 1982.
Imagine you do what most people would be doing in this, which is put that album on your record player during a party. First two, everyone's kicking it. Third one comes along and you're like, oh, for God's sakes. You just skip it to Thriller, don't you?
Halfway through that conversation they were having in the song, which is so horrible, I half expected like them to go, hey, Michael, do you want to forget to go? Just kiss? Like, that's how... It was so weird. Like, no... Grown men don't talk to each other like that.
If you ever want to see that taken to the next level, please watch the video for Was Up With You, which was a single by Eddie Murphy in 1993, featuring Michael Jackson. And they get together in the video and, wow, that's a new level of homoerotic. So please go and see that, because it's a very strange collaboration.
Side note on that album, Eddie Murphy was kind of like rubbing shoulders with all these guys in the 80s, mainly because he was going to like Studio 52 and going mental, basically. But he wanted to make his own album, and kind of, he'd had a song with Stevie, he had a song with Michael, he had a song with Rick James, Being the Best. And my guy wants to party all the time. But yeah, he was kind of doing the rounds with kind of all sorts of people, and there was a lot of shit on that Eddie Murphy album.
Can we move on from this song, because it's annoying me now?
Yeah, well, the next song is the big song, which surprisingly was the last single released. It wasn't released until 83 as a single. It's Thriller, originally called Starlight, but then reworked, featuring the voice work of Vincent Price delivering what they were calling a rap. And it is the song that everybody knows. Also written by Rod Temperton as well.
I mean, do we even need to talk about this song? I mean, everyone likes Thriller, right? Everyone.
Thriller has an interesting stigma with it, though, in that it is really difficult to separate it as a track from the video. So it comes with all the bells and whistles of being about zombies and ghouls, and the lyrics are about that. But as a piece of music, it's just odd to listen to out of context.
Yeah, and it is kind of slammed in with, as we were discussing, the old cheesy Halloween songs that is thrown in there. So I find it hard to distinguish it, because I've grown up with it, from songs like Monster Mash and Time Walk or whatever, because it's just so overplayed.
I think the thing with me with Thriller is when I listen to it again, I hadn't heard it for a long time, and we all know it, is I try to listen to it as if I'd never heard it before. And I would love to be able to do that without the whole Vincent Price thing and without the whole horror element. I would love to listen to it as just a straight ahead track, because as with most of the songs on this album, I mean, like the bass line, you cannot argue with that bass line. It's one of the most iconic bass lines of all time. And everything about that song is absolutely perfect and on point. The vocals, absolutely, it is a perfect song in every way. It's just the Vincent Price stuff. I just go, oh man, turn it off before the song finishes.
No, man, like, you gotta understand, like, you say that, but like, this is the most, other than what, like Monster Mash, Thriller is the most popular Halloween song of all time. Like you can't separate that, because it's that big and that good that it was the most known Halloween song of all time.
But that's my point exactly. It's like I'd like to separate it from that so I can concentrate on the actual jam itself.
That's what it is. That's like saying I want to listen to Guns N' Roses without guitar. It's just, it is what it is, Like,
oh, that's not the same thing, is it?
There's a great video on YouTube of Vincent Price actually doing the rap on a chat show. I think it was Letterman. They actually got Vincent Price to do the rap on a chat show. Wonderful. He was a talented guy, had a great career. That's a story for another day, though, I think.
it's weird you said that, because I was thinking, if they could get Paul McCartney to write a rap for him to put on the end of this, it could have really made it better. Like just spitting some bars for the last minute.
Oh no, I've heard Paul McCartney rap. He did some weird cod Jamaican reggae appeal thing. It's absolutely terrible. Please look it up on YouTube. I can't remember what it was for. It was like Go Meat Free Mondays or something like that. Please look it up.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. That's absolutely horrendous.
I kind of meant Vincent Price rapping, but oh god, Paul McCartney, no.
Well, Vincent Price dabbled in sort of... There's a weird sort of fraternity of horror people kind of doing voiceovers and music. So, I was watching an episode of Would I Lie to You last night when Richard E. Grant said his, mystery guest was a record producer and made a house track with him, and he did a soliloquy from Shakespeare to dance music. And Vincent Price had his own thing with this, and Christopher Lee did his metal album about Charlemagne, and it's just kind of like an odd Shakespearean actor fraternity that are deciding to dabble in music in their late careers.
Vanity projects, man.
Random.
For me, Thriller, it's kind of like a Christmas song in that you can only really play it in a certain context, and I think that loses its appeal for me. So I can't really go to it as a track very often. I did listen to it on my whole playthrough when I listened to it earlier, and it is perfect within the context of the album, but it's such a unique piece of pop music in that it is so grounded by the message of, the macabre, that it is really difficult to just take as a piece of art, as a pop track. Like the other singles, you can easily take and go, right, you can put this in the context of just play it at a party and people dance to it. This one's a little bit different because you put it on in the middle of a summer party and people are like, I don't really want to do the claw dance thing. It's to be used on special occasions.
I get what you mean. No, I know. I completely agree.
I'm just waiting for Peter Cushing to come out with his sick drill album. From the grave.
The next track on the album is another big single. It's Beat It. And this one is quite timely, considering the recent death of Eddie Van Halen, who makes the iconic guitar solo on this track. So maybe this is a chance for the Cacophony Sessions to pay tribute to Eddie Van Halen.
I actually thought you were going to say because of Trump.
No.
Yes.
Well done, Alex.
The problem is that Trump hasn't beat it yet, has he? It's like he's lost, but he hasn't fucked off yet.
He's been beating a dead horse for a long time.
I heard it described
Yes, he
as
has.
when you're watching a horror film and the main monster dies, but there's still 20 minutes of the film left.
Yeah.
On the subject of Trump and music, did anyone see the conspiracy theory that at all of his kind of big rallies and speeches in the last few months, there's been someone in his camp which doesn't believe him anymore, so he's been deliberately sabotaging his outro music, so they've been playing YMCA and stuff while he's finishing up for walking off stage.
I hadn't noticed this. That's brilliant. If that, I need to check that out because if that just
Yeah, have a look online because he's literally up and dancing to YMCA completely unironically.
Anyway, enough about him. Beat it, everyone.
I'm going to chime in here because, I mean, obviously Eddie Van Halen, he was my man in my early days of guitar playing. I'm not going to talk too much about Eddie Van Halen because this is about Michael Jackson, but I just want to say it's one of those kind of examples of how a guitar player can perfect their craft so perfectly in that they can write a guitar solo in a top 40 hit, and it's the sort of guitar solo that a single mum housewife on the school run could sing along to if they wanted to. But yeah, that's it really.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Martyn.
I hit the nail on the head. It's amazing. But my favourite thing about the song is actually Steve Lukather's rhythm playing. I think the main riff is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a lot of Toto on this album.
It's an amazing, amazing riff. You just get stuck in your head, and as a guitar player, you're one of those kind of things where you go, I wish I'd written that. You know, it's just so simple, straightforward, but does its job really well. It's just really effective in every way, and the whole song itself is great. You know, it's just a really cool song. Michael Jackson's vocals, again, on point. They are on the whole album pretty much. Yeah, for me, it's a highlight of the album. It's not my favourite on this album, but you know, that's what it is.
I mean, it's just so many good bits. I mean, the vocal lines on it, like just his delivery of all the vocals on it, like the melodies he picks is just perfect. As you said, like the guitar is just iconic. I mean, everyone can recognise it within the first like 3 notes. And yeah, the intro's pretty cool as well. I mean, for me, it's just a really, really, really strong Michael Jackson song.
Up there with his best. For me, I mean, the thing I love about Van Halen's guitar work is that although, like, how to phrase this, Van Halen were never a band. Again, they fall into that group of bands that aren't a band I want to listen to at home. However, you can tell his guitar playing the second it starts, and that solo you can tell is a Van Halen guitar solo. From a mile away, not even being a Van Halen fan, it's so obviously his guitar playing in that solo. And the rhythm parts for that track are really good. I think Michael Jackson's vocal delivery is great. I mean, I'd say it's probably my favourite track on the album.
Also, there's some rumour I was reading, this may be half wrong, but I'm sure that he received a call, probably again from Jones, fucked up at 2 a.m, saying he wants to have him on this song. And he recorded his guitar solo free of charge, saying he did it as a favour. It was like a skeleton track. But then Jones sort of, A, liked the demo that he'd given him, and B, probably didn't want to pay him, so put it on there with no subsidiary or payment to him whatsoever.
Well, I'm sure he did all right anyway.
I'm sure he could pay his mortgage still. Yeah.
I think he was probably getting a bollocking off his management to be like, you're on a fucking #1 album and single and you've made nothing.
A song like Jump is probably almost as popular as Beat It, so I guess, you know, doesn't matter.
Oh, God.
I fucking hate Jump, by the way. I hate that song so much. It's up there with Journey's Don't Stop Believing.
Plus, incredible leotard.
I think Beat It's a really important song as well, because it's one of the first songs to come through on MTV for a black artist to be exposed to the mainstream like that. Beat It was the song that did it, because of the rock elements and because of the fact that you've got Toto back in you, you've got Eddie Van Halen doing such an iconic guitar solo. It really broke through to the mainstream at the same time as Lionel Richie's, I think it was All Night Long, and Little Red Corvette by Prince. Take a drink.
I think also the thing is with this song is, as you know, like in the 90s, it became the big thing, the mix of rap and rock, you know, the mix of the white and the black worlds in music. And this is kind of quite a highlight in that it's a rock song and an R&B album, and you know it's essentially by a black artist.
Yeah, that's a good point.
With an
actually,
overtly hard rock song, a hard rock song that Motley Crue fans would like.
Because it predates Run DMC and
I believe it does.
doesn't
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, by a long way.
Yeah, so it's probably quite ahead of its time in that regard.
Speaking of ahead of its time, track number 6 is the iconic Billie Jean, which for me is one of the greatest pop songs of all time.
Agreed. It's that good.
It is that good. I when I started playing bass a couple of years ago, after I started to get semi-proficient, I decided to try and learn the bass line, so I did. It's easy to play a couple of bars, but if you try and play along to the whole song all the way through, it kills your hand. It is so difficult to play, man, and keep that groove and keep it in time and keep it tight. It's that bass line in it, it's that is the driving thing in that whole song, and it's unbelievable.
The bass line killing your hand is true of most funk bass lines, particularly having played bass in a band with Dan. Every funk song that he asks the band to cover, and then makes you do a 12-minute live
Cosmic slop.
Of,
Anyone?
Yeah. It's just RSI inducing. I mean, it's a great bass riff. It's clever and it's simple. I don't like this song as much as Beat It, but it is a classic for a reason. I can't dispute that. I think what's very odd is how much the synths sound like synths that dated badly from the 90s. Because there was that thing in, like, you listen to that sort of, it was the slightly hardcore end of the chilled Ibiza stuff in the late 90s. And the synths are like the same sound as Billie Jean. So it was 20 years ahead of its time, but I still don't think it's aged that well.
Oh, I disagree. I think it's timeless. I think Billie Jean has no space or time in which it can be confined. You just listen to it and it doesn't take you to a particular year. It feels like it's always been there.
Oh, see, the thing I find with this album is production-wise, it sounds like an 80s album. It's like when you delve into more of the niche stuff that's coming out at the moment, like some of the electronic bands that are coming out, the production is radically different. And so the songs on Thriller are strong. Don't get me wrong, like the vocal melodies on a lot of the tracks is strong, the choruses are strong, the hooks are strong, but I don't think it's accurate to say that the production or particularly the synth sounds hold up to things that are being released today. They don't. They sound good in the nature of the song, but it's a very 80s album, in my opinion.
On the subject of synths, it was like... I think synths are quite a hard thing to pin down because they were brought out and then were used kind of experimentally to begin with by artists because they didn't really know how to use them. And then later on, they were sort of retrospectively used for the retro feel of it. And then new technology came out and it's quite like a secular, odd thing to unpick. So, for instance, like... acid house and Chicago house in the late 80s were like deliberately using Roland 303s and 808s because they sounded crap and they were being used in a way that they weren't supposed to be used. So that kind of created a sound.
They were also cheap, Dave.
Yeah, but they weren't originally. They were cheap in 88 and 89 because nobody used them properly, or nobody really used them, and then they were in bargain bins, and then people bought them and made a new sound out of it. But what I'm saying with the whole synth thing is it's just an odd thing to unpick because it's so complicated. Some synths were popular, some weren't, some were massively expensive, some were cheap, some were used properly, some weren't.
For me, I'd say the synth is the only thing that dates that album. Like, if you just put the bass and the guitars and replace the synths and the production, that album, you could release that today and it would still be one of the biggest selling albums of all time. Although you'd have to take The Girl Is Mine off it.
Jones was a synth pioneer. He was very good on it, but like he wasn't in the same league as Herbie Hancock, for instance.
No, he wasn't.
I guess that you have to kind of make the distinction between something sounding dated and something just anchored to its time. I think if you did release the album today with its synth sounds, everyone would go, oh man, this is a nostalgic masterpiece. It'd be like something like The Weeknd or something.
Yeah, very similar to what Bruno Mars was doing quite recently.
Yes. I don't think it's dated. I think it is just rooted in its time. But I think the sounds are still just as gorgeous as they were back then.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion, man, you know.
It's just like your opinion, man. So next up on the track listing is Human Nature.
It's all right. That's all I've got to say about it.
Back to the cheese.
I'm so disappointed that it's written by a member of Toto.
It's basically a Toto
Yeah,
song.
I can hear Toto all over it. I mean, it is yacht rock at its finest, the old Human Nature.
It's the worst thing I've ever heard Toto put their name. So I like Toto a lot, but I don't like this song with Michael Jackson singing it. This isn't the weakest song on the album because The Girl Is Mine definitely is. But this and the next track. Actually,
I love the fact that once again you've already revealed what your 2 lowest tracks are, and once again they're up there with my 2 highest tracks.
Actually, to be fair, the track 9 is also awful. So I could have just stopped after with Thriller, like skip The Girl Is Mine, stop at Billie Jean. You've got like the best top 5 tracks, and then everything else I'm not so keen on.
I mean, I didn't mind this song too much, but I just thought it was just a little too subtle, you know? Like, it never really got going for me for some reason. Like,
the melody in Human Nature and the chorus, I think, is just beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, the progression of the
I'd agree.
chorus, they give me almost synesthesia. So I think that's great.
It's Magnolia painted walls in music form.
Man, you think it's boring?
Yeah, very boring. I don't like it.
I think I'm not boring. It's just a little understated, I think.
I always kind of saw it as an uncut gem. It needed...
I quite like the track.
Bit of Paul McCartney on it.
Oh, yeah. That would have really shoved it in the bargain bin.
Hey, Michael, it's just human nature, man. Oh, Paul.
Give me all your back catalogue. If you ever want to sing Happy Birthday to your kids, that's $5 for Michael Jackson, baby.
Wow. Okay.
It took us a really long time.
It did take us a long time to
point.
get there, but we got
We
there.
were doing so well, and the one person who did ruined it.
Just
was
to
Dave.
clarify, he was never proven of anything, but we all know he did it.
Hey, I was just talking about singing Happy Birthday to your kids. I wasn't talking about...
So was I.
So I think the line has to go something like this, right? If you read Edgar Allan Poe, right, the guy married his 13-year-old cousin and died drunk in a ditch somewhere. Lots of artists aren't nice people. It doesn't make their art less valid. Kevin Spacey, for example, let's do something more recent and topical, right? The guy probably deserves to lose his job for if the allegations of sexual assault are true, and I haven't followed the case that closely. But it doesn't mean that you should whitewash his art, because when you're making art, you're not particularly acting slightly different because you're being somebody else. That's the whole point of acting. So removing actors from history who've done things we didn't like. I think it's slightly different in music, because in music we expect to be listening to a piece of the person, as it were, but it's still the persona of the person. And I think a beautiful piece of music is a beautiful piece of music, and I don't think we should be stigmatising somebody for listening to music made by somebody who may or may not have done something evil.
The bottom line is, no one ever talks about Elvis Presley. Priscilla Presley moved into his house 2 years before they could marry when she was 16. No one mentions that ever.
He also met her when she was 14, got her hooked on prescription drugs, and used to take her for dates to morgues while she was 14.
So this is the thing, we selectively choose. For some reason, we seem to selectively choose people to shoot down and destroy. And I don't understand. There's something in the collective conscience that decides we're going to destroy some people and canonise others. I mean, it's like John Lennon wasn't exactly a savoury character all the time, it's this whole, we need to disconnect the art from the artist, because a lot of classical composers were nasty people. A lot of classical painters or fine artists, whatever you want to call them, were nasty people, but because we didn't have the internet, nobody knew they were nasty people. But you still appreciate the artworks. I think we need to disconnect art from artists, and I don't think it's relevant at all in Michael Jackson, because it's not like he was singing songs about doing things to children, whether he did them or not.
Also, to make another point blatantly clear, nothing was proven. It's still massive conjecture. Personal belief is nothing went on there.
My take on it is about, I think Tom kind of hit the nail on the head, to coin a phrase, is that we live in the internet culture, and it's all about sensationalism. And I think because Michael Jackson was such a huge star, the public like to see someone massive get knocked down, and they like the juicy stories, and they like that whole kind of thing. And he was a bit weird and he was a bit strange, and he was tabloid fodder basically. And I think a lot of it is down to how it was presented to us rather than the facts of what actually happened. I think people just want to see a Sun headline or a Facebook post or whatever these days, and that's what they base their judgment on. And it has made us a more nasty society in that sense. But I think that has to be said. I mean, you mentioned like older artists who were not savoury. Back then, it wasn't so much of a tabloid culture, whereas now all it takes is for someone to.
Well, they didn't have internet conspiracies.
Exactly. We live in a bit more of hopefully a more aware society, but the general public is still hungry for those juicy stories of like somebody's done something wrong, especially somebody as huge as Michael Jackson. It sells papers.
My personal take on it is that something did happen. I think I've seen enough documentaries, and as somebody who is a huge Michael Jackson fan, that's a really difficult pill to swallow. So you kind of approach the music in a different way. But ultimately, I decided that these songs have resonated with me for so long that it becomes impossible to ignore them.
Also, I think it's quite an odd case of kind of it doesn't definitively fall one line or the other, where kind of other cases do. It's like singularly probably the only case where you could still get an argument in the room, because nothing has been really proven. There's no evidence. There's no there's a documentary made, but then there's an equally interesting documentary made from the other side of the fence, which kind of disproves everything the other one just said.
I think South Park sums it up the best. South Park, when it's just like, he's like, sure, he touched some kids, but it's Michael Jackson. It's Michael Jackson, come on.
But you've also got to look at the person there. Michael Jackson, you look at his background and his childhood and the obvious mental issues that he was suffering throughout his life. He's a different kind of person to someone, say, like Gary Glitter or Ian Watkins, who seemingly were
trying to hide their monstrousness.
Gets together. Yeah, they were just predators, and I think Michael Jackson was a very vulnerable person, and I think that he kind of got wrapped up in this horrible world of fame, and that the man must have been very confused, and if anything did happen, in what context did it happen? Whereas the likes of Ian Watkins did some absolutely horrific things, but they were extremely predatory. There was one motive
and
there.
There's definitive evidence, and he's been convicted of that.
There's definitive evidence. But with Michael Jackson, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, that was around that was saying he was just kind of like looking for a childhood he never had, in a way, and confused it with a sexuality or whatever.
Number 8 is one of my favourites on the album, if not my favourite on the album. It is PYT, Pretty Young Thing.
I'm sorry, just after we had the whole discussion about it's just such an unfortunate name for a track to come up after we just had that discussion, isn't it, really?
Is this one he wrote?
I think this was written by James Ingram.
It was, yeah. And Quincy Jones.
This is a really good song. It's really funky.
He
plays with his vocals in a kind of, a pitch-shifting way. There's a lot of call and response. It's funky. It's driven by guitar. It's got all the elements of post-disco that you'd like to find around the early 80s. Hard-driven guitars, more than the synths. It's just a fantastic track. It's one of my favourite early Michael Jackson tracks. One of my favourites that he ever did.
Yeah. I mean, I really like the synths, right at the end of the chorus. I'm not sure about the robot PYT. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
PYT. But other than that, for me, it's just a brilliant funk song.
I love that bit. I think it's kind of reminiscent of what's to come later with Daft Punk and Chic and those sort of bands. But yeah, the chorus is really good. I think it's that and Human Nature. I couldn't really make up my mind on my favourite tracks on the album.
Do you know what? It could almost sound like something off of Daft Punk's Discovery album with the synth pads and stuff. It's got that feel to it. I think it's got the luscious synth pads in it.
If you take it to the Daft Punk reference, there's a lot of similarities between PYT and Edwin Birdsong's Cola Bottle Baby. It's a similar kind of vibe to that track, and that's maybe where we're getting those vibes from.
Yeah, very similar. And also Bobby Brown, will bring up him again, popularised the word tenderoni on his Heat Ronnie, which is also in like some Chromeo albums, and Eddie Kendricks, and there's a few kind of like bands which come up with obviously this as a major influence.
It's just a cool song, isn't it? It's not very much to say on it. It's just good. It's just I dance to it, and I think that's kind of what it's supposed to be for, you know.
Martyn?
I think it brings the album round full circle almost, in that, you know, you have those kind of like really nice kind of disco-y bangers at the beginning, and then the kind of middle there's all crazy stuff going on, and then this kind of brings it back to like a kind of, let's get back down to just some straightforward kind of sunny, you know, kind of like just upbeat, happy, you know, kind of R&B, you know. I think it sequenced perfectly on the album.
I think it's more sort of Jones's writing than Michael Jackson. Again, Michael Jackson couldn't give two shits about pretty young teenagers, basically. And Quincy Jones is much more interested in that kind of thing.
It was the 80s, it's fine.
Tom, what are your thoughts on PYT?
It's all right. I mean, it's better than either the tracks either side of it. I'd say it's the third best track on side 2 of the vinyl. I'd put Beat It and Billie Jean above it.
It's a tough side. If you're looking for the best song on a side, it is a tough side to be contending in.
Janet Jackson and Latoya Jackson singing in the background as well.
Yeah. The last track on the album, finishing us off nicely, is the ballad, The Lady in My Life, which features one of my favourite Mondegreens.
Another Temperton jam.
Yeah. One of my favourite Mondegreens from my own perspective. A Mondegreen being a misheard lyric. And at one point I did think that instead of singing I'll Love You More Each Day, I thought Lady in My Life was a tribute to funk singer Morris Day. For a while I thought he was singing I'll Love You Morris Day. Wasn't that though, not at all. I don't think Michael Jackson and Morris Day would have had a lot of love for each other, to be honest.
I ain't got time for that, Dan.
This song's all right. I like this song. I think there's an extended version out there that I particularly like, and don't know why they made the edit. But I think it's a nice way to close the album. It's a pretty decent adult contemporary R&B ballad to finish the album. If it was a bit of a step down of an album closer from the previous track, PYT, but I still think it's a decent enough track.
I hate it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't think it's aimed at
on the album. Like it's only on the album. This and The Girl Is Mine and possibly Human Nature are only on the album to get it over a 40-minute runtime. And this song is particularly guilty of that. I mean, it's just pointless filler. It's just fluff. It's dull. It's cheesy. The lyrics aren't great. Just no.
Yeah, I think it's the second weakest track.
It's ballad by numbers, really.
Top being The Girl
yeah.
Is Mine, obviously.
I agree, yeah.
It just happens. It's just there. It exists, and like when it passes, you don't remember what you've just heard. To me personally,
This is... What was that?
that was Baphomet the Demon. He disagrees with us. He loves the song.
I mean, this is the biggest selling album of all time. So what did we think of the overall experience? Why is it the biggest selling album of all time?
I don't know, because it's not the best.
Because it's got 3 singles on it that had universal appeal in a time when people would buy it, because to buy the album would probably be the same sort of price as buying the 3 singles.
Yeah, also the singles came out fucking close to each other. If you're down the record shop or Woolworths at the time or wherever you could buy records at your corner shop back in the day, then yeah, you're like, I like this song, it's been on the radio, I like this. You might have heard whatever song came out first and thought, oh, I'll grab that. By the time you'd remember to go down to the corner shop to buy it, the next one when they come out, you thought, oh, I might as well just buy the album, it's only an extra £1.
As an album, it doesn't have a particularly good flow. It doesn't have an overarching narrative. It doesn't have a particularly consistent sound. It's a glued together group of singles with a couple of bits of filler.
Yeah, it's a party
It just
album.
so happens that several of the singles on it are up there with, like, deservedly some of the best-selling singles of all time. But as an album, I'm not actually that sure it works.
I think one of the biggest reasons it's the biggest selling album of all time is marketing. Yeah, it came out when MTV was, becoming a thing, and also, the Thriller video and airplay. I think marketing drove it. If it didn't have if it came out today, it had to compete with everything else. It would kind of fade in with everything else. I don't think it would stand out as such. And you also got to remember back then as well, as we've touched upon, black artists in the mainstream were not that common as they are now. And I think, because it was kind of like revolutionary in that sense, it was a black artist in a very, very mainstream world where it appealed to everybody of all classes and all social kind of tiers. But it was driven by marketing. It was like, it was in your face everywhere. You saw that cover all over the place. Massive billboards on the TV, every magazine. It was just really kind of thrown at us. So, people bought it.
I listened to this entire album on YouTube. So, it's just a quick way for me to listen to it when I was at work. And the album I listened to actually had 10 tracks. It had Carousel.
Yeah, Carousel's a bonus track. It was one of the unreleased tracks.
So I thought that was a really good song, actually. I was quite...
It's okay. It was included in the 2001 remaster that they did. There was another track as well.
Someone in the Dark.
Someone in the Dark, yeah, which was from E.T. The 9 tracks is how it was originally released and stayed that way until 2001.
Also, argument to be made for this is more concise with the two writers, Jones and Jackson. So the sum is greater than its parts. Aside from the fact of The Girl Is Mine, the songs which Jones and Jackson wrote together are You Want to Be Starting Something, Beat It and Billie Jean, which are the probably 3 biggest sellers from that album.
Yeah.
So they gel well together. They work well together.
And the Thriller video, man. I mean, Thriller on its own, that probably drove a lot of album sales. They heard Thriller, and it's probably it's the most popular song on the album. It's the one everyone knows. And people heard the song and went, I'm going to get the album. It only needs to take one decent single to drive album sales quite a lot.
I wanted to round off the evening by asking everyone to look at the bigger picture with Michael Jackson. Seeing as we're here having this conversation, we might as well go full deep dive. And what does everybody think is the greatest song that Michael Jackson did in his career outside of this album, or indeed if it is one of the tracks from this album?
So I'll go first to get the birth out of the way, and I'm going to give a little bit of background first. So, I was born in 87. In our early years, most of us are only really exposed to in the first 5-6 years of our life, we're only really exposed to music our parents are listening to. And many people our age, that was Michael Jackson. For me, it wasn't. My parents never liked Michael Jackson. It was never on at the house. So my first experience of Michael Jackson was actually renting, taking out from the library, Dangerous on cassette when I was about 4 or 5. And I really liked that album. But actually, the track for me that I like the best, I'm not saying it's Michael Jackson's best track, okay? Michael Jackson's best track could easily be Beat It, okay? But I went to a primary school where we used to sing Heal the World and Black or White in our school choir, okay? But the Michael Jackson song that I go back to the most, probably, and I don't go back to many of them often, is because it was played all the time on Top of the Pops when I was a kid, and we'd only just got a TV, and Top of the Pops was one of the only things I was allowed to watch. And I'm going to say it, and you're all going to laugh at me, and it's Earth Song.
That was actually going to be... Because I'll be honest, my favourite of all time is Billie Jean. Easily, for me, it's Billie Jean. I think it's just the thing that sums up Michael Jackson the best. But if it wasn't going to be done, it couldn't be on the album. Mine would be Earth Song as well. I remember, like you, when I was, at school discos, and that was the song that was big when I was a kid at school discos. And I remember all the kids hanging off the fucking radiators, just like he does in the video. Do you remember that? All hanging backwards off the radiator, leaning forward, like, yeah. And I always have fond memories because of that,
Yeah, absolutely. I've got really fond memories for that track because of the video. Because, like, Top of the Pops, they didn't used to play the music videos for the tracks that often. It used to be predominantly live in inverted commas, performances to live versions they recorded earlier in the day. And then this one, they actually used to play the music video of it more often than he performed it. And it was on just for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it was in school discos and everything. And I like the vocal line, and it's got a nice sound to it. And it's a bit more like, it's got a bit more of an epic sweep to it than a lot of his other stuff. So yeah, I like that one.
I'm going to go next just because I want to follow on from Tom with the Earth Song thing. For me personally, the song can do one. But one thing I will say, the bass in it, I love that bass sound, that sub-bass thing. I don't know, Tom, you might be able to describe how they got that sound, but I absolutely adore the bass sound in it. It's just so thick and deep. And like brilliant. I really dig that. But the song itself, I don't know. I don't have a nostalgic connection to it, so I guess. But I think with me, Michael Jackson is all about nostalgia for me, because I'm not really a fan. I don't choose to listen to Michael Jackson. Don't Stop Till You Get Enough is a big favourite because I always liked it. Wanna Be Starting Something. Those songs I kind of like a lot because they bring back good memories. But then there are songs that stand out to me because they came out when I was really starting to learn to play guitar and stuff. So Dirty Diana with Steve Stevens, Billy Idol's guitar player on it.
Tune.
Absolutely brilliant. Great riff, great guitars. It's a banger of a tune. Give In To Me as well, with Slash on it. And I think Slash is playing on that. Again, like the Eddie Van Halen solo, it's Slash straight away. You just know, and it just sounds perfect and it suits him perfectly. But the one I'm going to go with, and it's a bit of an odd one, and again it's because of nostalgia. I had, back before the internet and everything, I used to tape songs off the radio and make these little compilation tapes and go out cycling and stuff and listen to these tapes, and they'd be random. There'd be a Beastie Boys track on there, a Rage track, a Chris Rea track. It'd be that random. And I taped Jam off of, I can't remember what album it is.
Dangerous.
I taped that off, and that used to come up surprisingly between some, I don't know, hardcore, New York noise rock or something. And I love that track. It's just a piece of fun, man. It's just it is a jam. It is just a great tune. It's just upbeat. I used to love hearing it. It used to cheer me up. So I'm going to go with Jam as my favourite. As for the best Michael Jackson song, or the greatest, I'd say it's got to be a mix between Black or White or Thriller, hasn't it? They're like his biggest kind of massive tunes, you know what I mean? But I could be wrong. It's all subjective.
Yeah, true.
Black or White and Heal the World, I just remember from primary school, singing in the primary school choir. It's weird because I prefer Dangerous as an album to Thriller, but I criticise Thriller for having filler on it. And
Dangerous has got a lot of filler.
Yeah, Dangerous is nearly an 80-minute album. Nearly an 80-minute album on 14 tracks. And because all the tracks are too long. Like, Will You Be There is nearly 8 minutes long. It's completely unnecessary.
Yeah, the first 3 minutes of that are like a choral sample.
But I think the thing for me with Dangerous is the choruses in the tracks resonated with me more, and the sound of the album resonated with me more, and I've got nostalgia for it. So I like Jam. I think Jam was my favourite track, but that's because I was listening to it on a cassette, and it's the opening track on the side, so it's a lot easier to find.
Jam is a good song. Dave, what's yours?
So the way I kind of approach Michael Jackson is his career is like so massive. So he's got some solo tracks when he's quite young, and he's with the Jacksons, and then he's solo again, and then he's got offshoots later on where he goes back and does albums later on. So he just thinks with like 3T and a few other bands he was associated with. But I kind of like some odd tracks of him. So he did an album really late in the day called Escape.
Yeah.
And Slave to the Rhythm, I think, is incredible. It's a really good track that he did really late in life, which kind of shows off that he still had a bit of spunk left in him. I really like the track "Burn This Disco Out" off the Wall. But if I was like forced, I would probably select PYT.
It is good. It is just good.
But yeah, I just think his career is just so massive and he's done so much that it's kind of a tough one to grab on your favourite track. But yeah, those would be up there. Burn This Disco Out, maybe Doctor My Eyes, which he did with the Jacksons, PYT, and Slave to the Rhythm.
I've got to admit, doing this podcast on Michael Jackson, I found that when I was listening to Thriller, the only time I've really listened to Michael Jackson, other than a few of the singles growing up, most of my exposure to him is because I own that compilation, Michael Jackson the number ones. So you do get a pretty good variety of some of his greatest songs, but I think I've missed a lot of ones which are a little less known because of that. And I feel like in doing this, I kind of want to go back and listen to a lot of his other albums and just give him a crack really now.
Also, a bit like Tom touched upon, I got a Walkman as a Christmas present when I was maybe 6 or 7, and the album that I got with it on tape cassette was Bad. And that was like the first bit of music I owned for myself that wasn't belonged by a cousin or a parent or anyone else. So it's quite deep ingrained in my head.
This is a really difficult question. One that I really love is on Off the Wall. It's called I Can't Help It, and it was written by Stevie Wonder. It's this...
Yeah, it's a fucking classic. I nearly put it on.
Yeah, it's a really spacey, ethereal, really melodic. Oh, it's a gorgeous song. I really like Give In To Me. Martyn mentioned that. Tabloid Junkie is another one that I really dig. It's a strange one. It's more paranoid at that kind of stage of his career, but it's the group behind it is that good. But I think in terms of what I'm going to settle on, I think I'm going to have to go with Remember the Time. Simply because I really love New Jack Swing, and adding an element of New Jack Swing into Michael Jackson's music was just the perfect way to take it, and it's just a great song. I'm always in the mood for listening to that. So yeah, Remember the Time for me. It's the coolest video as well, with all the Egyptian iconography. Yeah, it's just a cool song, great beat. Timeless.
It is a great song, I agree.
Can I also put 2 PSs in as well?
Go for it.
So Just Good Friends from Bad and Working Day and Night from Off the Wall are also incredible. I will DJ both of those and have done for ages. He's one of the people where like the deep cuts, even people know the deep cuts, which is really good. So like you can play stuff which is not overplayed, so it doesn't like hurt your soul as a DJ because you get sick of playing them. But people will still be like, oh yeah, fuck, I haven't heard that song since I was so-and-so years old and Nick Malone's album.
Scream or something like that, that's not as prominent.
The deep cuts do as well as like the overplayed ones because people are just, they love Michael and they want to hear something that they haven't heard 9 million times before. They're almost like on the same page as you when you're DJing.
I'm at peace with Michael Jackson's catalogue now, but for a while it was difficult to, after I kind of made up my mind about what I think happened. I took a while. Well, I didn't listen to him quite so much, and I really got into Janet Jackson as a replacement. I tell you what, her career is something.
Yeah, it's cracking as well. I really enjoy her.
She's done some really good stuff, and she appears here on this album. I think it was one of her first recorded appearances in PYT. So yeah, just wanted to get that in there.
She sings the na-na-na bits.
Michael Jackson's best ofs are fucking rad, like, because he released so much good stuff. I think this album, at 9 tracks, if you're going to release an album that short, if there's any filler on it at all, you're leaving it really exposed. And I think that's what he's done with Thriller. The singles are amazing, and I do like the album, but it's not a 10 out of 10 record.
I think for me, personally, I think Thriller is a great album. I think Michael Jackson's other album, Sign of the Times, is great because Stevie Wonder's vocals on it are amazing.
You know, we've got our listeners.
Do we?
I think there's 4 of them. When Whittle mentions Prince, they have to drink. When you mention one of your catchphrases, you have to drink. I think when you've collected all of your catchphrases, you must down your entire drink. which happened, I think, about 15 minutes into every podcast ever. You need the "it's not for me" single school mum Prosecco run and hit the nail on the head. When you got those three, boom, down it.
I forgot to mention this. Shout out to James, one of our friends who actually listens. But I was talking to him about Martyn's catchphrases the other day, and he makes apps for a living. So I asked him if he can make a Martyn Lay soundboard. If ever mine can't make it, I haven't gone to the point of listening through the old podcast to get the sound clips yet, but we're going to make the Martyn Lay soundboard.
Maybe we can mass produce them. So if we've got an interest in people having Martyn Lay apps, then give us a shout on Twitter or something. Yeah. And I think this seems like a good enough place to wrap up for this evening.
Did we talk about Smashing Pumpkins yet?
I've already told you they released 2 new tracks. And that was
We
right
stopped
at the
listening.
beginning of the podcast.
Well, I'm going to say goodbye then, fans, before Whittle does his outro. Bye, everyone out there. Deftones.
We need to get our shit together. We'll get the next episode out a lot quicker, guys. We promise. It's been fun. It's been a cold one.
Been a cold one. Bit like Michael Jackson.
Happy Halloween,
Going dark.
everyone.
See you later. Bye. Stay spooky.
Every